rich was Elliot Ludwig to have built a mega factory that extended 1,000 feet underground? How much did it cost to build all of Playtime Co's factory? The truth is, friends, it cost a huge fortune. You could say that Elliot Ludwig would be best buddies with Elon Musk today, but why don't we break down exactly how much Playtime Co cost? And get ready, because after watching this video, you're gonna feel broke. You're broke! Let's start with the land Playtime Co was built on. Obviously, a huge amount of space is needed for a factory like this, including a parking lot, of course. On average, a toy factory like this requires around 18 to 25 acres of land. So let's say Playtime Co had about 22 acres in total. Back when it was built, land was super cheap, going for about $410 per acre, a total cost of around $9,000. That might not seem like a lot, but just wait until we calculate Chapter 1. First, we have the reception office, where visitors were welcomed before entering the factory. Even though it was just a 500 square foot room, construction alone, putting up walls, adding a roof, and setting up the space, could have cost around $30,000. But the real expense came from windows, doors, electricity, furniture, and decor, adding another $39,000, bringing the total cost of this tiny office to almost $70,000. Next, we have the famous gift shop. Even though it looked small, the construction alone could have cost $25,000, but things like glass display, cases, shelves, lighting, and cash registers added another $52,000, bringing the total to $77,000. And lastly, the security room. Even though it was just 300 square feet, construction would have cost around $25,000, but the monitors, security cameras, and wiring made it way more expensive, raising the total to $77,000. So just the entrance of Playtime Co already cost over $224,000. And we're just getting started. On top of that, there were extra expenses like permits, additional security, cleaning services, and decorations to make the place feel like a magical toy factory. With all that included, the total cost of the entire entrance area was around $315,000. And keep in mind, this was just the first step inside. Then we moved to the lobby. Here, a giant Wack-a-Wuggy stares right at us. This area has 6 important rooms, but let's start by calculating how much the lobby itself cost. We don't know exactly how much it cost to create Wack-a-Wuggy, but if you want a separate video where we calculate the cost of every Playtime Co toy, like Mommy Long Legs, Doey the Dogman, or a real-life Poppy, let me know in the comments. This lobby covered around 500 square feet, featuring a statue and a domed glass ceiling. It was most likely made of laminated tempered glass, which alone could cost around $40,000. In the center of the lobby, there was a big Playtime Co sign, probably made of painted metal, adding another $7,000. With extra decorations, this lobby had an estimated total cost of $55,000. Then we moved to the 6 important areas. We haven't visited most of these, but we can estimate a price based on possible sizes and equipment. Testing area, $138,000. We can estimate it covered 1,000 square feet, including machinery. Innovation area, $165,600. The theater, an area of approximately 10,000 square feet. Its construction and equipment would cost around $1.5 million. The cafeteria, $110,400. The office system, $138,000, including computers, advanced security systems, and maintenance equipment. The power room, $69,000. And finally, the Make-a-Friend hallway. It was just a decorated corridor, but even that had a total cost of $41,400. In total, the lobby cost is $2,264,400. The next area is the storage zone, where Playtime Co employees kept toy boxes before shipping them out. $48,000. It features several metal shelves, each costing $3,000. along with loading equipment and a robotic arm, bringing the total to around $60,000. So in total, the storage zone would have cost about $108,000. Then, the system connecting the storage zone to the Make a Friend room is one of the first automated transport systems we see in the factory. It's a conveyor belt approximately 500 feet long, which could have cost around $48,000 to install. Then we arrive at the Make a Friend room. This is where visitors assembled their own toys. Building this room could have cost around $128,000 due to its giant size. But the real eye-catcher is what's at the back of the room. If you look closely, you'll see huge conveyor belts descending from near the ceiling and disappearing deep into the factory. These belts seem to stretch for miles, as if they were connected to hidden areas of Playtime Co. We don't know exactly how many miles they cover, but an industrial conveyor belt costs around $8,000 per 30 feet. So if there were at least 1,000 feet of conveyor belts, that alone would add up to about $240,000. On top of that, we have basic overhead cost and robotic arms. Just the 3 robotic arms seen here could cost between $25,000 and $50,000 each. And then there's the giant assembly machine, a creation of Elliot Ludwig himself, except, well, it doesn't actually exist in real life, but if we had to put a price on it, it could actually sell for around $300,000, excluding the other millions of dollars it needed for research and testing. Adding everything up, the Make a Friend room would have cost approximately $608,000. From there, we run from Wack-a-Wuggy and encounter the second conveyor belt system, bringing the total conveyor cost to $64,000. After escaping Wack-a-Wuggy, we reach the catwalk room. This is a vast and seemingly endless section of the factory. The steel structures making up the catwalks would have cost around $75,000 due to its resistance and length. On top of that, they would have needed lighting and security systems, adding another $15,000. Total estimated cost, $90,000. But what about the cost of excavation and construction? We don't have exact figures, but this place is so massive and deep that tons and tons of rock had to be dug out and transported elsewhere. Honestly, I'd estimate at least $5 million just for excavation and construction. At the end of this room, we find Poppy's room. To get here, you have to go down a ton of stairs, which probably weren't cheap to build, around $20,000. The room itself, including the furniture and decorations, would have cost $65,000. With this, the total cost of Chapter 1 comes to $8,391,400. And well, if you thought that was expensive, just wait to see the other chapters. After freeing Poppy and waking up, we continue exploring the next expensive areas of Chapter 2. As we move forward, the first thing we encounter is the Stairway to Hell, an endless reinforced metal staircase that descends into the unknown. It's not just an ordinary access point, but a structure that could weigh a ton. Its estimated construction cost is $50,000. Continuing through these hallways, we realize they also represent a significant expense. But to keep things from getting boring, the approximate cost of all the hallways in Chapter 2 is around $500,000, because there are just too many. At the end of one of these hallways, we find a small storage room, worth around $20,000. From there, we reach Elliot Ludwig's luxurious office. His office isn't just an ordinary employee cubicle, but a 540 square foot space with luxury wooden furniture. But the most interesting part is its hidden security system. Considering all these details, Elliot Ludwig's office cost around $100,000. Then we arrive at one of the many storage rooms in the factory, which spans at least 750 square feet, making its estimated cost $60,000. From here, we reach the navigation room, a strategic point inside Playtime Co. Since it's just an internal shortcut system made up of hallways and tunnels, if we estimate each shortcut is around 1,600 feet long, constructing reinforced tunnels would cost approximately $2.5 million, considering excavation, reinforcements, and materials. Further ahead is the staff access area. Here we find 4 slide entrances, each approximately 100 feet long. Each slide could easily cost $20,000, totaling $80,000 just for access. But that's not all. There's also the electrical area, and based on what we saw in Chapter 1, we can estimate a cost of $75,000. After crossing, we finally reach the game station, one of the largest areas in the factory, with 16,000 square feet of surface area and a volume of 800,000 cubic feet. It includes slides, monkey bars, spinning wheels, and other interactive games. Building a structure of this size, plus the playground, would cost around $3 million. Inside this station is also the train, a key means of transportation inside the factory, but we'll calculate its cost at the end. The molding room, where the grab pack hands are made, has 4 massive industrial machines, one of them similar to the Make a Friend station, along with a control center that oversees production. The machinery itself represents the bulk of the cost, estimated at $1.5 million, while the construction of the room and its infrastructure would be around $800,000. Now we move on to one of the most interactive areas, musical memory. Installing the screens and the technology to make it work would have cost around $700,000. From here, we arrive to a more unsettling place, the Rejected Toys Island. This large room doesn't have infrastructure as expensive as other parts of the factory, so we estimate a cost of $100 grand. Continuing our tour of the factory, we arrive at another game, Wack-a-Wuggy. Building this type of game with sensors and hydraulic mechanisms could cost around $500,000, considering the durability needed for constant use. After leaving the game, we reach a long spiral staircase that takes us back to the game station. This room alone would cost $40,000. To connect all these sections, the factory has an extensive network of hallways and tunnels, including the cart hallways, which stretch at least a mile. These passages allow for the rapid transport of materials and personnel via carts on rails. Implementing a car system over such a long stretch would have cost around $2 million. Finally, we reach the last minigame, Statues. This space functions as a maze with multiple obstacles, including foam pools and a large slide. Building this type of structure could have cost around $800,000, including the viewing platform we exit through. On top of that, we'll just add $30,000 for the playground equipment and everything inside. At last, we arrive at the water treatment plant, a critical area for the factory's operation. At the entrance, we see a large control panel, followed by a water tank with a capacity of at least 26,000 gallons. Constructing a water treatment system like this would have cost around $1.5 million, considering the filters, pumps, and purification systems. Next is the incineration room, a space built almost entirely from steel and equipped with an industrial incinerator. These incinerators can cost anywhere from $100 grand to $500,000, depending on their size. In total, this incinerator could have cost around $450,000. And counting all these areas we saw during the chase sequence, we add $2 million for all the equipment scattered around. Finally, we have the industrial shedder that ended Mommy Long Legs, with an estimated price of $250,000. Moving forward, there's Bay 09, an area filled with pipes and equipment, so we estimate its price at $500,000. Inside the factory, the train wasn't just decoration, but an actual transportation system for employees, operating more than 650 feet underground. To build something like this, first the tunnels needed to be excavated, which is extremely expensive. Digging underground tunnels can cost around $30 million per half mile. And if the train covered at least 1 mile inside the factory, just the tunnels alone would have cost $60 million. Next, the steel rails and electrical power system would cost $3 million per half mile, adding $6 million to the total. Then come the stations and access points, which would cost up to $400,000. Finally, there's the cost of the trains themselves. A light underground train can cost between $3 million and $10 million per unit. If the factory had at least 2 or 3 operational trains, that would add another $6 million, bringing the total cost of Chapter 2 to $89,955,000. After the train crash, the first place we wake up is in the trash compactor, which, wow, what a place to regain consciousness after almost dying. And this isn't just any trash compactor. No. This could easily be the most powerful and most expensive trash compactor in the world. Just the compaction machine alone would cost about $150,000, since it's massive, and the walls and flooring of this area would add another $100,000. But it wasn't just about crushing stuff, there was also a rest area, bathrooms, and a phone, which would have cost $63,000. And to keep everything running properly, they probably installed generators, control panels, and backup systems, which could have cost around $70,000. Adding all that up, this section of the factory alone could cost about $383,000. After surviving the giant trash compactor, we moved through the dark tunnel that brought us here, remembering the train crash at the end of Chapter 2. This silent passageway leads us to our next stop, the mini Playcare train station. The first thing that stands out is a massive 16-foot statue, possibly Huggy-Wuggy or Kissy-Missy. A figure this big, considering it's still in good condition after all these years, could have cost around $20,000. The station itself was probably built with high-quality durable materials, giving it a total cost of about $200,000. On top of that, the station has its own rail systems, platforms, and train mechanisms, which would have cost around $180,000. And lastly, there's a security room, similar to the one from Chapter 1, so we estimate its cost at $60,000. Total cost of the mini Playcare train station, $460,000. After the mini train station, we arrive at the Elliot's Express cable car station. The station itself is small, but building it along with its equipment would have cost around $200,000. The entire cable car system could have cost about $400,000. So, between the station, the cable car, and installation, the total investment would be around $600,000. Now let's talk about the most expensive underground dome in the world, Playcare. First, they had to dig over 650 feet deep to place this massive metal capsule, measuring 34,000 square feet and standing 330 feet tall. And we're not talking about just any hole. This was a precisely reinforced excavation to prevent collapses or water leaks, driving the cost up to around $10 million. The entire structure was built with high-strength metal and features an advanced ventilation system to refresh the air and preventing from turning into an underground oven. The metal structure alone could have cost $12 million, and the ventilation system around $3.5 million. Now let's talk about what's inside Playcare. To create the illusion that kids weren't trapped in a metal dome, they designed a fully immersive environment. A traditional playground, a dog pond, pumping systems, artificial grass, trees, and other decorations, highly detailed wall murals, an advanced lighting system that mimics daylight and adjusts to nighttime, this price including maintenance. So the total for Playcare's interior? $290,000. At the center of Playcare, we find the generator room. The construction of the room itself could cost around $20,000, but the technology inside, control panels, security systems, and monitoring had to connect every part of Playcare, adding another $185,000. Total cost? $205,000. The Playcare gas production zone consists of two massive rooms, each holding 265,000 cubic feet of space. The construction of these two rooms, along with the machinery and power systems, would have cost about $1.5 million. And now we're gonna get into the super expensive areas inside the Playcare. First, we reach Home Sweet Home, the massive mansion that surprisingly still doesn't have a complete map despite how huge and expensive it is. First off, the house is made of wood, which helps reduce costs, but considering it's over 11,300 square feet across multiple rooms deep underground, the total construction cost would be around $1.3 million. But the real shocker is what's inside. First, let's check the ground floor. After descending the spiral staircase and passing the welcome room, we enter the main hall. From there, we find a power room, a laundry room with 8 washing machines, 2 small offices, 4 large offices, 20 individual rooms, 2 offices housing power cells, and a fully functional furnished kitchen. That's a lot, but wait to see the second floor. Going up the spiral staircase, we find a lounge area with couches, 8 massive dorm rooms, each with 16 bunk beds, 4 nursery rooms, each with 10 cribs, 2 mini kitchens with medical areas for children, a giant bear hug statue with advanced security systems, worth about $25,000. And that's not all. There's also a small attic, a huge maintenance area with tunnels and an elevator. How much do you think Home Sweet Home could have cost? Well, the total cost of Home Sweet Home is $3.5 million. If you ask me, this makes sense for a facility meant to house at least 150 children and 40 babies. Now let's move on to the school. Building this school wasn't cheap. With a total size of around 10,800 square feet, the main structure alone, including walls, roof, foundation, and architectural details, cost around $2,550,000. The school included 10 classrooms, 3 offices of different sizes, a principal's office, maintenance areas, and a lounge. But the real luxury was the power system. Here they installed a massive turbine to ensure a steady power supply, which cost around $1.2 million. Of course, until Miss Delight destroyed it. Total cost of the school, $4,420,000. But if you thought Playcare was already expensive, get ready, because now we're moving on to Playhouse. The structure was built with durable, cushioned materials designed for safety. To estimate the cost of Playhouse, let's break down everything inside. A maintenance area, 5 playrooms, multiple slides, a large playroom with a rotating electrical mechanism in the center, a massive pool, another large playroom, an industrial elevator, and a final playroom with an exit. Considering all this, along with the special materials and constructions, without counting the unused areas, Playhouse would have cost around $5,110,000. Next, we head to the Playcare Councelor's office. The construction alone wasn't exactly cheap. The exterior facade cost around $22,500, but with detail and durable finishes, like we see in the game, the price jumped to $67,500. The 2 massive Huggy-Wuggy statues weren't cheap either. Each one cost around $20,000, adding $40,000 to the total. But the real expense is inside. This building included 20 small offices, 1 large office and 1 medium-sized office, an elevator, a reception hall, and a massive maintenance area with an industrial elevator. Considering past area costs, the Playtime Councelor's office likely cost $3,670,000. The Playcare toy store had a simpler design. Inside, the store wasn't particularly large or luxurious. Total estimated cost $250,000. To reach the final battle with Catnap, we head to the safe room, a hidden security chamber inside the gas production area. This wasn't just a shelter, but a high-tech control room for Playcare's energy and electricity management. To get there, you had to use a costly industrial elevator, at least 100 feet tall, which already gives us an idea of how high up it was. Considering the size of the room, its construction alone would have cost $120,000. The advanced machinery inside? Another $400,000. So the total cost of the safe room, including the elevator, $600,000. After defeating Catnap, we continue to the hatch room. This room had a volume of about 85,000 cubic feet. How much would building something like this cost? Approximately $120,000. But that's not all. There's also a massive industrial elevator that takes us deep into Chapter 4, which alone would have cost around $150,000. Adding in all the technology and mechanisms in this room, we can tack on another $50,000. Total cost for the hatch room, $320,000. This brings us to the final total of Chapter 3 of Poppy Playtime, $46,808,000. For Chapter 4, we start descending this massive industrial elevator, which goes down to a great depth, approximately 230 feet. We already calculated the structure's cost at the end of Chapter 3, but we left out the rail system, motors, electrical system, excavation, and framework. Adding all of this up, the total cost of the elevator comes to $1.1 million due to its massive size. Once we exit the elevator, we reach the lift control room. It's a medium-sized room equipped with loading gear for receiving and sending materials via minecarts, which already adds significant costs. Taking this into account, along with the Forceman office, we get a total of $380,000. From here, we enter the caverns, a vast tunnel system that we'll see throughout Chapter 4. This might still be unfinished construction sites, but that doesn't mean they were free. Since they stretch for about a mile, excavation alone would cost $10 million, adding structural reinforcement, lighting, ventilation, air extraction to prevent suffocation, and walkways. This system would cost approximately $16.5 million. From here, we reach Checkpoint 1A, a designated area for construction workers. Since it's just a small room with an office, it'll cost $30,000. But things get more unsettling when we find the toy graveyard, which is essentially a massive junkyard. Constructing a warehouse of this magnitude, considering it spans for about 10,800 square feet, would cost around $3.5 million. After leaving this scrapyard, we head to the prison's loading station. This small area would cost $230,000, but we also need to consider the train that transports cells to the prison. It's not as detailed as the one in-game station, but it's powerful enough to move the cells. With the station and the train combined, we estimate a cost of $800,000. Once we exit, we move towards Playtime Co's prison. The main structure consists of multiple cells, at least 50, but these cells are not just any cells. According to Riley's notes, they have high security systems, plumbing, and heavy reinforcement. We can estimate that each of these cells would have cost around $8,000. Additionally, the prison includes a control room and a staff area with beds, tables, and lockers. Just for this first section of the prison alone, had an estimated cost of $1 million. From here, we reach the Central Zone, which contains 5 offices and a control area. Since everything here is pretty basic, we estimate $200,000. After this, we enter another prison section, similar to the first, with cells, staff area, and a control room, adding another $1 million. Before reaching the Containment Zone, we pass through several janitorial rooms and small service areas, with a total cost of $80,000. But the entrance to the containment area looks straight out of a sci-fi movie. Considering all the technology and hydraulic systems, we're looking at a cost of $600,000. Then we arrive at the containment area, which consists of cells designed to study experiments, featuring tempered glass to prevent escapes. These require highly resistant materials and advanced security systems. This section contains 7 high security cells, bringing the total cost to $5 million. Our first encounter with Jarnaby happens in a warehouse, which would cost $50,000. Right after that, we head into a massive server room, which must have been incredibly expensive due to the cooling and structural requirements. But we also need to factor in the cost of each server. These don't seem to be cutting edge, so each one might cost around $7,000. This room appears to hold 1,400 servers, meaning just the servers alone would cost $9.8 million. With construction and installation, the total would be $11,370,000. Next, we come across a much larger warehouse, estimated at $500,000. From here, we reach an archival office area, costing approximately $250,000. One thing we have to mention is that the prison also includes the Pianosaurus chamber, which is essentially a massive metal box with an observation platform. Constructing a containment box like this would cost around $250,000. Then we find the interrogation rooms and office spaces, around 15 rooms in total, adding up to $400,000. After following Dewey, we finally reach the prison courtyard. This area features guard towers, but instead of being open air, it's structured as a huge enclosed room. Building a space like this would fall in the range of $250,000. Then we find more offices, 60 grand, a small storage room, 30 grand, and a maintenance area with gears, costing $50,000. From here, we get to a large industrial kitchen, which would cost $300,000. And before reaching safe heaven, we come across the bathrooms area, which would cost 80 grand. After escaping the prison, we continue to safe heaven. These types of facilities usually have reinforced doors, independent ventilation systems, and basic supplies. This one also includes several rooms, a bathroom, and a medical area. Assuming it's the size of an industrial shelter, its construction would cost around $1.5 million. Something they definitely wouldn't have forgotten is the sewers. These require reinforced concrete and high-capacity pipes. Constructing a sewage system like this, with at least 1 mile of tunnels, would cost approximately $10 million. And of course, we can't forget Playtime Co classic elevators, which we estimate at $30,000. Now let's move on to the wastewater treatment plant. It has a large control panel and a tank with at least 26,000 gallons of capacity. If you've ever wondered why factories prefer dumping their wastewater into rivers and land, the cost of the one we see in Chapter 4 will give you an answer. Having a plant like this is anything but cheap. For starters, the combination of its structure and tanks can cost up to $1,150,000, and the equipment and systems it includes are not cheap either. These plants have filters, chemical and biological treatment systems, and pumps, adding up to $1,250,000. So the total cost of this entire facility could reach to $3 million. Fines for dumping wastewater are way cheaper than this machinery. From here, we move on to No Man's Land, which, aside from looking like an area connecting to the Doctor's lair, also seems to be a power plant, since players' main objective here is to power up the machinery. This area is massive, so it makes sense that it was supplying energy to all the machines in Dr. Sawyer's lab. Just the large turbine player activates would cost around $5 million, and considering the sheer size of the area, the total cost would be about $25 million, taking into account the infrastructure and machinery needed to handle such massive energy loads. Now we reach the transport capsules leading to the lab. There's nothing in real life to directly compare them to, but based on the other elevators, each one would cost $25,000, plus $30,000 for the construction of the room, bringing the total to $80,000 when considering the second capsule. After descending, we find a control room, worth at least 40 grand. After this, we arrive at the cold storage area, where liquid nitrogen conduits are regulated. There's a lot of machinery and reinforced pipelines built to withstand the temperature, probably cryogenic material. Installing these pipelines would cost $500,000. On top of that, the room itself is quite large, adding another $500,000. And then there's the cooling area, which is basically a massive freezer, costing approximately $500,000. After crossing the cold storage, we reach the secondary lab, which is a network of surgery rooms where modifications were performed on the experiments. Each room would need advanced surgical equipment, operating tables and other medical gear. The most expensive part here is in the construction, but the medical equipment. If we assume at least 5 surgical rooms, each equipped with the necessary surgical tools, this area could cost up to $12 million. Next, we enter the containment area, where the nightmare critters were held and studied in cages. Here we find about 10 massive cages, which could have cost around $650,000 if we include the machines Harley Sawyer forces us to use to kill a nightmare critter. After this, we find several control rooms and elevators, adding another $650,000 to the total. But the most impressive part comes when we reach the doctor's headquarters. This is a room where Harley Sawyer's digital consciousness is stored. It has around 300 computers and a massive machine that houses his brain. For a system with so many servers, the cost of this installation could be about $3 million, plus another $5 million for the machine storing Sawyer's brain. Continuing on, we find another cable car system. Considering the cost of the one from Chapter 3, this one could have cost around $600,000. Before reaching the safe haven, we find a small storage area worth about $40,000. The generator room contains a high-capacity industrial generator, which could cost around $500,000. From here, we move on to the foundation. It's a massive room filled with pipes that connect to multiple tunnels and includes a control room. Given its size and specialized piping, like we've seen before, its construction could cost $700,000, including the small offices surrounding it. The mine shaft is an unfinished structure, but the estimated cost of this work would be around $4 million due to its size and reinforced structures. After this, we arrive at the place where we defeat Dewey, which appears to be a massive hydraulic press, costing approximately $800,000. Next, we find another storage area with 2 trucks, which could have cost about $100 grand. When we reach the hideout with Poppy and Kissimissy, we come across ventilation block B6, which is part of the air duct system. At the end of the video, we'll calculate the total cost of all the air ducts and ventilation. Finally, we reach the entrance to the lab, which is a wide hallway with a self-sustaining poppy garden. Just this area alone would cost about $800,000. So, how much did the entire lab cost? We don't know exactly how big this lab is yet, but assuming it's similar to Russian laboratories, it could include areas like experiment rooms, sample storage chambers, control rooms, checkpoints, biotechnology and genetics labs, and more. All of this would bring the total cost to approximately $50 million. Now, the big question: how much did all of Chapter 4 cost? The total comes to $168,270,000. But we still need to account for general costs like drainage, pipes, the electrical system, and ventilation. For the pipes and drainage alone, the cost would be about $50 million, considering the massive effort required to connect all areas. The same goes for ventilation and heating, adding another $50 million, otherwise they would have died from the heat or lack of oxygen. And as for the electrical system, Playtime Co could have spent around $40 million, including the miles of cables and installations to power the entire factory. And well, now comes the strangest part of all this. How much did the excavations for Playtime Co cost? With all the information I provided to ChatGPT about each area of Playtime Co, it concluded that the underground portion of the factory is approximately 2 square miles, which is exactly twice the size of Disneyland in California. To excavate and reinforce all of this, they probably needed at least $780 million. and that's being extremely stingy. However, it's very likely that during their excavations, they discovered massive natural caves, just like what Playcare and the entirety of Chapter 4 seem to be. Even so, they still had to reinforce the areas and carry out smaller excavations, so the costs remain almost the same as what we calculated while analyzing each of these chapters, saving the company a big fortune. And now the moment of truth. How much did it cost to build the entire Playtime Co factory? If we add up all the chapters plus the piping, ventilation, and electricity, the total cost of the entire Playtime Co factory would be $453,424,400. And we probably missed a few things that we didn't calculate in the video, like the chimneys and the other areas visible from outside. Plus, we didn't include the section seen in Project Playtime either. So, it's possible that Playtime Co's factory could have actually reached $500 million. But what do you think, guys? Did you expect the factory to cost this much?